For our top news, it's apparent, according to the UN, it's now or never to avoid climate catastrophe. In technology, the artificial recreation of smells using a multi-component olfactory display, and apparently smell-o-vision is on the way. In the environment, there's lots of low and no cost ways to halt global warming. Let's get on to that. In materials, converting body heat into electricity, a step closer towards high performance organic thermoelectrics. In space, this startup is catching a rocket with a flipping helicopter, and that is finding ways to save costs on recoveries. In biology, fish apparently can learn basic arithmetic. And in us, or some of us, Fox viewers are less likely to believe lies after being paid to watch CNN for 30 days. And in health, a time jump by 30 years. Old skins can be reprogrammed to regain youthful function. So that's what we'll talk about. And what's this in our top story? That it's now or never to avoid climate catastrophe.
Well, the third part of the IPCC report came out, and in this part, they were talking about what we can do about the problem. And they are saying that humanity has less than 3 years to turn the tide on the rise of planet warming carbon emissions, and less than a decade to slash them by nearly half. That's a lot of change that needs to happen fast. And the world is now has its last real chance to ensure a livable future. The change is daunting, but they say it's still possible. The thing is, we actually have to do something. The part of the problem is that the history of this change is littered with broken climate promises. And if you look at the leaders saying one thing and doing another thing, some people think the leaders of the world are just lying about it. And IPC says that we're at a crossroads, though. The decisions we make now are going to decide how livable a future that we and our children and grandchildren have. And there are things that we can do. The very first thing that we need to do is to stop putting the polluting gases into the atmosphere. I think we all knew that. And then besides cutting emissions, we have now understand that spending the money on cutting emissions is less expensive than fixing the problem afterwards. The to achieve these targets, we have to reduce carbon emissions by 43% by 2030 and by 84% by 2050. Uh, these are tough numbers, and uh, without reductions and deep emission cuts, then we don't have a chance. And the world must radically reduce its use of fossil fuels, and uh, curtailing emissions, they say, is no longer enough. What we have to do is to finish developing and uh, start doing at scale this CO2 removal from the atmosphere. And it's a big challenge. Cutting back, there are things we can do, of course, as individuals, cutting back long flights, changing to plant-based diets, and uh, doing what we can with our housing and stuff. And uh, if we actually do all the things that people can do, we can actually accomplish about half of the change that is needed by changing the life that we're living. I think those changes probably are greater than we're going to be able to do. Uh, One of the issues in this is we still have an issue with income equality and the impact upon the environment. It turns out the households that are the top 10% of the earners around the world contribute almost half, that is 45% of the greenhouse gases. So the creation of this problem, most of it still comes from a small slice of the human population that affects everybody's life. And so they, if you look at where the energy or the pollution comes from, in 2019, then industry was 34%, more than a third. Uh, Agriculture, forestry, and land use was 22%. Transportation was 15%. Buildings were 16%. And the energy sector itself was about 12%. So they know where the problems are. As people, though, what we can do still is, you've heard some of these things before, reduce your air flights. Consider stop using a car. Maybe we should all get electric bikes, use public transportation, and big impacts can be made by renewable electricity and by EV use. So it is now or never, but we still, there is time. All we have to do is act. Who here thinks we're going to act?
Any thoughts?
Well, I think that we have had so many warnings over the years that people are just no longer reacting to it.
You think it's a chicken little problem?
Something like that. And but I think that also the governments should just tax appropriately. For instance, there should be a very increased tax on gasoline and electrical use and things like that. The industries that are do most of the polluting, they should be taxed appropriately to the cost. And but of course, all of that is a problem because particular industry, they have lots of influence. Corruption, it's called, and so they avoid all these obvious, I think.
You know, when I looked into it about 10 years ago, I concluded it was too late. Even then, it was too late, mainly because we just can't change our behavior. I can change my behavior, but in order to make a difference, it's got to be, I don't know, 60, 80% need to change their behavior.
Mhm.
About the only good, another thought is the war in Iraq is maybe Europe will wean themselves off of gas and oil, and that could have quite an impact.
The other thing that's interesting is saying we've only got 3 years. So really, we all know how quickly the last 3 years went by, and before we know it, we'll see the answers. So that's maybe good. Well, people don't worry so much about problems that are in the distant future. And if we actually see the real problems, then maybe something will happen.
Right. I agree.
I'm pessimistic because if you look at the war in Ukraine, the pollution that is creating by itself, and potentially more, depending on what weapons they use. If we had a world government, I think we don't. We have a bunch of leaders of different countries that can't lead for whatever reason.
Yeah, you would think that with the problem that Europe is having with energy because of the war, that there would be this massive investment right now in more wind power, particularly in solar power. Europe has still got wonderful potential for wind power.
Do we
But
see a sense that that is starting to occur?
I have read about talking about it, but that's all that I've read is talk.
No, that actually, for years and years, Scandinavia has invested so much in windmills, and there's part of Denmark that are 1% green. So there's a lot of activity in Europe. They're way ahead of the United States, for example. So the
Hmm.
United States is catching up now.
But I suppose the big issue right now is Germany.
Hmm. Yeah, what are they going to do?
They're so dependent on
Russian oil.
on oil and gas.
And coal.
Why don't we get on to the artificial creation of smell? What's that about? Will that
Well,
deal with COVID?
the it's an interesting development, and that's why I have it as the top science and technology story. And what they have is they have developed a technology that generates a variety of smells, of scents. And what they did to develop this is they used mass spectrometry and analyzed more than 150 different olfactory items, and then out of that, they looked at the general data and found 20 main components of all of these smells. And so they've made a little machine part of it is like an inkjet printer where it has its 20 different components and it spits out the smell elements together and mixes them in with the other smell elements, and then they vaporize it, and it turns out the smells that people sense and notice are pretty accurate for the what they were trying to create. So they have smell-o-vision, and with a result that is predictable and gives them the kind of smell they want. They certainly still have more smells to look at. We have in our various forms of art and entertainment, we have used reproducing of vision and sound and tactile sensations. We haven't been able to much use smell in this, and it looks like now it's to the point where they will be able to. And if you look at this, then uh, applications they're speaking about it. For example, at the movies, to add to a richer sense of the movies, or in watching your TV show, your show on Netflix, or in playing a computer game, or these are the things that I think will be leading applications when you're doing things like online shopping and things like this. They'll give you smells that increase your wanting to buy that thing. I read today that there is a real big interest in using this kind of technology with the virtual reality metaverse environments, because if here you add uh, the smell component to this 3D experience, it makes it much more immersive. So the thing about smell is that smell has a much more emotional content than the other senses, and uh, they want to be able to use this for entertainment on one hand and for more powerful commercials to sell you more stuff on the other. So I think this will be a coming thing, and I don't know when you'll buy your smell-o-vision attachment for your TV or computer, but it's going to be coming.
Any thoughts?
I
How
can't
about
wait to see. I can't wait to see my first wrestling match.
Maybe your dog would like it.
Yeah,
how about the
yeah.
people, half the people who have lost the smell because of COVID? Would it work for them too, Richard?
Yeah,
Okay,
it's,
that's good. You could make a COVID test that way.
Okay, so here's the problem with this.
Okay.
The University of Toronto Athletic Center doesn't allow women, I don't know about the guys' changing rooms, to wear perfume because some people are highly allergic. And in a confined area, unless they've got really, really good air exchange, I can see that the smells are going to interact with each other, like, in a movie theater. So how much of these molecules do you need in the air for people to sense them? And then how do you get rid of that so that you can put the next one in?
Right, right.
And how many people come down with coughing and heaving because they're allergic to the chemicals? So I don't think it's as straightforward as.
Well, it's for its use in public spaces, you have one situation. For its use on your computer or your entertainment at home, it's another situation, and the risk of the smell aversion is certainly there, but it's not going to be as social if it's just you and your partner watching TV.
Richard, if I'm allergic to a certain smell and then they artificially create that smell, am I also allergic to it?
I don't know. It depends. I don't understand uh, the details of the allergies, whether your allergy to the smell is actually a reaction to some other particle that is in the air besides the odor smells or what. So I don't know the difference between a smell and what causes an allergy.
I think it would depend on what part of the molecule. So if the artificial molecule has the same part as
Mhm.
in the actual thing, then yeah, I think there's a good, because there's a lot of research to get rid of the thing that people are allergic to in cats. They're
Right.
trying to develop cats that don't produce this
Right.
this particular molecule. I think it's quite a large number of the population, like 10% or something, are allergic to cats. So they're
15%.
trying to, okay. Yeah. So it would depend how close the artificial smell matches with whatever people are reacting to.
And I would suspect that it's going to be different than the allergies because what they're doing here with the smell, I think, is producing a simpler molecule than the typical organic molecule, that's a complicated protein that we're reacting to.
Yeah, but it just depends whether
Right.
it still has that DNA
Sure,
sequence
sure,
there.
sure.
What's interesting too is the analogy to sight, where we only sense 3 different colors, but our brains combine the amounts of each
Yes.
that we sense into the zillions of colors that we see in the world. And there was nothing in this article about how many different olfactory sensors or receptors there are in our nose.
Right.
But the idea would that they're using 7 different chemicals in different combinations to replicate these smells suggests that there are 7 different receptors that they have to trigger to recreate the same sensation in our brains.
And we, of course, have a lot more than 7 different kinds of olfactory uh, sensors in our nose.
Well, do you really know that? Or is it
I,
like,
I really know that. I don't know what
oh,
the number is, but it's a big number.
the other off-putting thing is that for us to sense any particular smell, actual molecules really having particles of that rotting flesh coming in contact with your nose and triggering those receptors.
And I wonder, Andrew, on that, when they say that puppies maybe have 300 times the sensation of smell as we do, I don't know how that deals with receptors and all that.
Yeah, do they have more receptors or more densely packed receptors or just a bigger variety of receptors? Who knows?
I think it's both. I think it turns out with dogs with long noses, they have more receptors, the same mix of receptors as other dogs, but they have more receptors. So that's why long-nosed dogs are the good smellers. Not that they smell
And the
good,
other
but
the other interesting thing is when these olfactory sensors contact the smell, they're actually destroyed and have to be metabolized and new
Ah.
and
sensors
make new ones.
regenerated.
Wow. Okay.
And And the interesting thing is these sensors, these receptors are neural cells, like the
Right.
cells in your brain. And if they
Right.
can figure out how these cells regenerate themselves, it'll go a long way to spinal cord research and all this other stuff about
Hmm.
regenerating failed nerve
Right.
cells.
Right.
So maybe there's a spin-off here that will benefit the future.
Richard, if we want to move on again to the environment, what's this about there being lots of low and no cost ways to halt global warming?
Well, this I think is very much connected to the earlier report from the IPCC, and they're saying about half of the things that we can do to reduce our carbon in the atmosphere are things that we can do at little cost or no cost. It's stuff that is relatively cheap. And so while we have a lot that we can do, uh, about half of it looks like low-hanging fruit that can be done fairly effectively. And uh, these things include particularly uh, the use of renewables for both cars and for power. The combination of using these kind of renewables could reduce the pollution that we're putting into the air now by about 20%. So it's a fairly significant piece. Doing things to restore, first to stop destroying and then to start restoring uh, the environment, the trees and the forests and that kind of stuff together could accomplish about 15% of what we're doing. There is a lot of talk about uh, changing the way we eat. That has an impact if we move away from animal-based foods, but the impact there is relatively low. So the biggest impact that can be done and can be done the most effectively are the changing of power sources to renewables. And now the good thing about those is that they have become a lot cheaper. If compared with 10 years ago, the cost for solar cells has come down 85%, which is a pretty significant drop. Wind power has also come down during the last 10 years, but it's only by about 50%. So some of the things that we can do to deal with this low-hanging fruit is stuff that is less expensive. And they also point out that these things, you could look at them like they have a negative cost because they are that much less expensive than the use of fossil fuel, that you could say they pay for themselves. So it's just more stuff we have to do, and we know how to do it, and we can afford to do it. We just need to uh, figure out how to act.
Any more comments on that?
Well, I would think that we somehow could start a campaign advertising it literally, explaining very simple terms is what you can do, and keep repeating the fact that it's that this approach is cheaper than burning coal or oil or things like that. Just continue to repeat it. We can make a change, I think.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that would be good.
Yeah,
No,
Just
we're
like what I
talking-
would expect from somebody who is in marketing.
no kidding.
We've been talking about using electricity, and what's this next story that our body heat can be used to make electricity?
Well, earlier in my life, I spent several years as a marketing guy in the high-tech power business. And what I learned during this time about technology is all of it requires power. And so as they are trying to make smaller and smaller things, then they're looking for other ways to power them because you don't want to put batteries in them and you don't want to have to plug them into the wall. And so here, what they have found out to do may give other opportunities. Can you imagine, for example, having your cell phone where you didn't need to charge it? It could be charged up just by carrying it in your pocket, assuming that your clothes have this new magic fabric in it. And the what they have done is they have used a technical solution, a thing called organic semiconductors. This is a different class of semiconductors. And this thing about organic semiconductors is they can make something that is flexible. So if you're trying to build a power supply into your shirt, for example, you want it to be able to be flexible. And what they have found is that taking these organic semiconductors and doping them in a particular way. Doping is a semiconductor technology term for adding impurities, if you will, and you add some of these other impurities in it and you change its electrical structure. And what they have been able to do with this kind of specialized, what they call modulation doping approach, is they have been able to make uh, these organic semiconductors that have a high performance efficiency, turning heat into electricity. And if you look at this thermal energy, some people are saying now, after the solar power and wind power, the next big opportunity for power sources is thermal energy, because we throw so much heat away. And what you can do with these thermal energy sources is you turn heat into electricity. And so here they've developed a new efficient way to be able to do this. And this way is looks like it'll be inexpensive and flexible enough where they can put the power supplies in your shirt or maybe in your shorts. I don't know. I would rather have it in my shirt than in my underwear, but I don't know about you.
Any
I
thoughts?
wonder how, yeah, I wonder how it works if you have a pacemaker.
I don't know. I bet it doesn't bother the pacemaker. It's just taking body heat.
Yeah, but I mean, this is the continuously on the pacemaker. You probably will screw it up.
Well, nah, it's not going to hurt your pacemaker.
Another thing I wonder about is that people are being told these days they shouldn't have your devices too close to your body. And they talk about cancer and other kinds of things. Does this mean we're going to get electricity, but we're all going to get cancer?
Well, we're all going to die anyway. What do you want?
No, just a minute. So he has Fred's got an excellent point, because there's lots of documentation about weird breast cancer from women that keep their device in their bra, and especially if they do it when they're driving. So there's an athlete, she had a 2-hour commute back and forth, and the problem is the device is pinging all the cell towers as I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. And it's a very specific type of cancer that these women get. So you don't want your device next to your body.
But here
I mean,
again,
these are young, healthy athletes, you know, they're in their 20s
but
and they're getting these weird
this the
cancers.
power source is not emitting radio frequencies or
No,
these
but the
other things.
device is.
Right, the
The
devices
device
are
is.
certainly.
And you're wise not to be having your device down in your pocket, because there's some evidence that men who keep their devices there are going to have lower fertility rates, which, Richard, as you know, I think is a benefit to the planet.
Well, I'm not afraid of my fertility rate getting lower.
I'm not either, actually.
You know, let's see. What is half of 0?
Right.
The reality here is it's very, very, very low amounts of power. So for the devices to actually use it, the devices are going to have to get much more efficient too.
Which
Because they
they're,
still,
of course, working on.
yeah, they still need way more power than what could be developed from body heat. But what they really need to work on is, we all know about electric eels and how electric eels generate their own electricity. Why couldn't we do that and use it to charge our electric cars?
Okay, that's right. You want to do genetically modified person so that he can go and put his finger into the charge socket and charge up his battery. Is that right?
Exactly.
Well, I appreciate your imagination. I think you just have to make sure that it's a good socket that he puts his finger into and it makes good contact. Otherwise, the lightning bolt might cause a problem.
Well, it's like you don't want to lick your finger and stick it in a cigarette lighter socket,
Ye-
that's for sure.
Yes. While I was in the consulting business, one place that I visited was working on a mobile robot, and the problem they had with the mobile robot is they wanted it to be able to plug itself in, and when you have the regular kind of plugs, there's this intermediate stage where the contact resistance is high and you create sparks and stuff like that, and that's a problem in a lot of environments. Creating sparks and flashes can create fires, and they didn't want their robot to start a fire.
Well, Richard, getting on to space, how do we recover our rockets? How do we save money on it? And what's this about using a helicopter to save the costs on recoveries?
Now, this is a new rocket company that I don't think many of us have heard of. It's a startup called Rocket Lab, and they're getting ready for their first official launch. And what they will do is launch 34 different commercial payloads. And as the rocket is going up, when the first stage releases from the rest of the rocket and falls to the earth, when it's about 4 miles up, its parachute will open up, and then these guys who are waiting around in their helicopter plan to catch it on the way down with a big hook. And they say that they have succeeded at this often in many test environments, but now they will do it for real. If they're able to do it, it'll be a cheaper way to recover the rockets, and if you lower cost, it gives them a product that can be competitive in the commercial space market. So they'll be using a big helicopter, a Sikorsky 92. It's used in offshore oil and gas transports and things like that, so it's got heavy lifting capability. But again, I don't know how good it is at catching rockets falling from the sky. And the other thing I don't know about this startup is one of the things in Silicon Valley that you learn about startups is there's a motto, do it, try it, fix it, because it's wrong. And so far, this particular company is most well known for their many test failures. And again, we'll see how this test goes. It's an interesting idea. I'm glad I'm not trying to run the project though, because I think I might never get to sleep until we caught that stupid rocket.
Any thoughts?
Well, I know that Elon Musk's company, XLab, I think it's called,
Right.
they have been working on this the retroactive, rocket. In other words, it would come down the same way it would come up. It fires and it lands on its feet, so to speak.
Yeah,
And
they catch.
apparently,
I think they catch them on a platform floating on the water or something.
Yeah,
no, I
that's
thought
correct.
they,
Or
I
sometimes
thought,
on ground.
yeah, that's what I thought too, on ground.
Yeah, on
And
ground or on water.
yeah,
Mhm.
and also I know that Elon Musk told some reporter that they will not rest until the cost of the payload is something like only $10 per pound.
Uh-huh.
Now it's more like about something in 3 or 4 figures.
Right. I
There's
think
a
more
great
likely four figures, $1,000 a pound. I've
Something
heard
like
of
that.
getting stuff to the moon is $100,000 a pound.
Yeah, right.
There's a great Netflix thing on Elon Musk and SpaceX and how much the original rockets were costing NASA, and it's down to $4,000 now with Elon's that where he recovers them, where they land on their
Mhm.
feet, so to speak.
Yeah.
But the Sikorskys are interesting because they use them now in Canada's oil patch. They used to have ice roads or build roads into an area where they're exploring. And now they've modified them. It's used in the mining industry as well, where you only need a few people to go in to clear a potential site that what am I talking? Anyway, where they think they're going to find oil or
Mhm.
the minerals that they want. The geologists have decided, okay, look here. And they bring everything in by helicopter so that it's far easier on the environment than building the roads into
Mhm.
these remote
Interesting.
areas.
Interesting.
And the reason this idea could save money is Elon Musk's system. The rocket has to carry the additional fuel with it to have the later self-landing.
Right,
So
the maneuverability. Yes.
yeah, so what it would do is reduce the amount of weight that had to be carried with the rocket
Hmm.
just for the landing, because the helicopter would affect the landing.
Uh-huh.
But
So that
Andrew,
increases their payload.
Yeah.
Andrew, it still has to be somewhat maneuverable, doesn't it?
The
It's just coming down with a parachute. So I
Oh,
think they depend on the maneuverability of the helicopter. I don't know how they have the helicopter in the right place. That doesn't sound like a trivial problem.
I was going to say, good luck with that. I'm sure that the rocket's got to be somewhat maneuverable, but I know nothing.
Well, the other thing, the article says that these people pushing the limits is in
Yes.
their DNA. I think they should add that pushing the limits of investor credibility is in their DNA, or
Sure.
investor gullibility,
Well,
because
I spent a lot
Well,
of time in Silicon Valley, and I'm familiar with that part of it.
yeah, this is
Yeah,
just
it-
this is a press release to attract attention more than anything else.
well, but Richard said how they operate in Silicon Valley, is you build it, you break it, because with SpaceX, even the guys that were working on it, after they had the third disaster, according to this recent Netflix things, they were sure that Elon was going to pull out, that he just wasn't going to go forward. But apparently that's how they work. When it
Right.
doesn't work, they pick up all the pieces and learn from that failure and then carry on.
Right.
Yep, they're lucky Elon is so single-minded. Is that program the one that was in his own words or something like that?
That title doesn't sound familiar. I'll have to look it up. It got IMDb rated at 7.2. I'll look it up and send Richard the link.
And did it have interviews with Elon Musk in it?
A few comments, but more a video of him watching the various launches.
Oh, yeah. Because really, SpaceX got its start ahead of Tesla. Elon has been interested in space longer than electric vehicles.
Hmm.
Yeah, SpaceX started in about 1998 or so, and Tesla in about 2002.
Well,
I think he started it with his spare money, didn't he?
He got his money out of PayPal.
Yeah. Oh,
That
Yeah.
was
well, that was only 300 million.
Also, him and Peter Thiel.
But he did it in a great way with Tesla. He did it opposite. Like the Model 3 was what he was aiming for, but he started off with Roadster. So how much did people pay for a Tesla Roadster? How many people have ridden in a Tesla Roadster?
You really?
They're awesome.
I haven't ridden in a Tesla, period.
Well, the Roadster was it's 0 to 60 in 2.3 seconds. And Gerhard said to me, "Are you ready? Are you ready?" And I'm like, "Ready for what?" Because it doesn't make any noise at all. It's just like you slam back in your seat. Anyway, I digress.
well, Richard, moving on to biology. A minute ago, Andrew said that we're all gullible, but apparently that's not true of fish because they can learn basic arithmetic. What's that about?
Well, the problem with teaching fish how to add and subtract is, they can't look at their fingers. So, but it turns out that fish can do that anyway, as long as it's not too complicated a problem. And what they did is they used as the basis to find out an experiment that they had previously conducted on bees to establish that bees could count. And the basic methodology is they use colors to as the signaling system, and they had blue means add one, and yellow means subtract one, and they would put the fish in an environment where they had different little signs in there, and uh, then they trained the fish if it was blue to add one. And by adding one, they mean if there were three blue signs, the fish would have two different apertures that he could go through, and one of them would have 4 signs in it, and the other one would have 2 signs in it. And if he successfully navigated to the +1, that is 4 signs for a 3 sign signal, then he got a food treat. And he didn't get anything if he got it wrong. And they found that adding these fish who they were able to successfully train were quite successful. They could add, I think it said, with an accuracy rate of 96% for the cichlids that they tried. And they also tried another stingray, a different kind of fish, and they were not as good of adders. Stingrays were only 86% adding, and they had lower numbers for subtraction, so fish are better at adding than they are subtracting. Then to further test to make sure their test was good, they tried another combination again after the fish were trained, where they had, for example, they saw 3 blue signs, and the correct entrance then would have 4 blue or 4 signs. They tried also having one with 4 and one with 5. And again, the fish were good at just adding +1 and not adding +2. So they got the right answer when they had were challenged in a different kind of way. And their conclusion is that fish, like parrots and honeybees and other animals, can do basic mathematics. We think fish are not very smart, but since we don't talk to them, we don't really know if they're smart or not. This says at least they're smart enough to be able to do simple math.
Any thoughts?
I'm going to send Richard a fantastic Japanese video of fish that are trained to swim in formation.
Oh,
And he
great.
can send it out to you.
Okay.
This is this kind of thing that they throw up on the screen at the beginning of continuing education lectures for veterinarians.
Okay. Very good.
Well, Richard, our next story says that maybe Fox viewers can learn something too. Apparently, they are less likely to believe lies after being paid to watch CNN for 90 days. Tell us about it.
Well, it was a groundbreaking study, and where they paid viewers of the Fox News work to watch CNN for 30 days, not 90 days. And the viewers ultimately became more skeptical and less likely to buy into fake news. And they saw an impact after only 3 days of watching CNN. The attitude about the news and false news and things were already changing after just a little exposure to other sources. During the time they were doing this, CNN was providing a lot of coverage on COVID-19 and talking about Trump's performance and on CNN, you found out a lot about COVID-19, and while you were on Fox News, there was much less, and the coverage on Fox didn't provide much actual information. But again, it turns out that even Fox News viewers, when they get other information sources and listen to them 3 days start to be able to open up their minds. I don't know what this means or what we can do about it, but it says uh, maybe there is hope.
Any thoughts?
Well, I think that most people are lazy and don't think. They get information poured into them, and they don't think, does this make sense or anything like that. They just accept it because they have other things on their mind, like maybe family problems or whatever. And so whereas CNN, oftentimes, and MSNBC particularly, you often have to think and draw conclusions for yourself. And that is something that I think that Fox viewers don't do.
On a little bit of a bigger picture, a couple of months ago, I read a long article in Mother Jones magazine, a research article that pulled together some research from a couple of studies that went on. And I would encourage everybody to read this article, because it proved to me anyway that Fox News is the source of a lot of America's problem. The title of this article was "The Real Source of America's Raising Rage." It's September-October 2021 issue. But it shows that the declining trust in government, the declining trust in our institutions, is all tied back specifically to Fox News. And the number of Fox News is the most watched news station in the world, and here it is doing all this to us.
Excuse me.
Thank you.
But what I'd like to see is two things, really. I'd like to see further studies for what happens after a month and after you stop getting paid to watch, or whatever. And I mean, I was so skeptical about this article when I first read it that, I looked at the date and I thought probably it came out on April 1st, because it just, but I did look at it, and I mean, it was reported in Raw Story, which is been around since 2004, but I wasn't very familiar with it. And it's only in Open Science Foundation at this point, but it seems to be rigorous research. And I was finally able to find out that the authors were from Berkeley and Yale, respectively.
Okay.
So I think that, I think it's pretty reasonable. I would like to see it extended, and then I want to see a big government handout for giving people, paying people.
I think your question about the longitudinal long-term effects is a real good one.
The other thing I'd like to see is, I mean, I'm still wondering why I haven't heard about this story before, even though it's been just about a week. And I really would like to see how it's been reported, if it's been reported on CNN and on Fox News.
Well, there is this idea of confirmation bias, and people tend to look at news that reinforces their existing view of the world or their existing prejudices. But you'll notice that they didn't try this on Democrats, and they didn't, maybe they weren't able to find Democrats that would watch TV for $15 an hour, or maybe they realized that Democrats are already too close-minded to accept new information from a source like Fox News, for instance. They didn't try Democrats on Fox News. They just tried.
Maybe they couldn't find any Democrats that could stand it.
They couldn't find any Democrats that would work for $15 an hour.
I know lots of Democrats that would work for $15 an hour. If you look at the people who are making $8 an hour, I bet they're mainly Democrats.
Anyway, my computer man is here and I have to bow out. Sorry.
Okay.
But this was a good session so far. It's gone
Okay.
very well.
Well, we're about ready to wrap it up anyway. So
Okay,
good to
but
see you, John.
Okay.
Richard, we're
Okay.
about reprogramming Fox viewers. Now, this next cell says that maybe all of us, through our skin, can be reprogrammed to be much, much younger. Tell us about that.
Well, this is one of the things that you should appreciate. The researchers have found a way to what they call time jump human cells by 30 years. And what they're using uh, to find this was an epigenetic research program. And they're doing regenerative medicine, and the idea behind regenerative medicine is to uh, create uh, artificially induced stem cell growth, and then the new stem cells can do uh, new jobs. The problem when they are doing that, though, is the new stem cells start off with the epigenetics of the stem cells in that environment. And what they have to do is kind of roll the epigenetic clock back. If you roll it all the way back, then the stem cell doesn't know what it's going to do, and it doesn't know if it's going to be a skin cell or a liver cell or an eye cell. So if you roll the clock too far back, the cell, you lose its identity. And here, what they figured out how to do with these skin cells is to be able to roll the clock back about 40%. If they take the stem cells and run them through this process using the Yamakaka factors and do it for 50 days, they lose all their identity. Here they use a similar process and just put them in it for 15 days instead of 50 days, and they were able to make skin cells that, as they looked at them scientifically, if you looked at both their epigenetic clock and the transcriptome of all the cells, then these cells had the same characteristic as cells that were 30 years younger. And that includes, with the stem cells being again able to produce collagen and all of those other things, it gives you nice, young, good looking skin. And this research, of course, is applicable in many other areas besides dermatology. They believe that the same kind of approach may be effective with genes involved in Alzheimer's and also in things like cataracts. So they are excited about the potential of other developments doing this kind of stem cell reprogramming, and they think it's particularly promising for the future of this work. And it really is. We've been hearing about epigenetics and the work that they're doing, and this is one of the early tangible results where it looks like this kind of epigenetic reprogramming can uh, if not be the fountain of youth, then at least the fountain of younger looking skin.
Any thoughts?
Nobody wants new skin?
Richard, where was this work being done?
The BABRAHAM, the Babraham Institute, and saying the name of the institute, I have no idea where that is.
And do you know what their process was for giving this epigenetic effect?
They didn't say in the article here, they were just talking about the results.
Yeah, okay.
But again, the process was, as they say there, the stem cell reprogramming done by exposing them to Yamanaka factors. And I've heard of Yamanaka factors, but all I know is the name.
Well, Yamanaka, I think, got a Nobel Prize for his work on this.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyone else?
I think what's interesting with stem cells is also what they can do to repair a retina. If you have problems with your eyes, and they're working on that, and the delivery method, which is not simple.
Yes.
But they hope that people who suffered from macular degeneration, that they can use stem cells to improve and fix the retina. I think that's very promising.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I can
Richard-
see that it would be particularly exciting at your household.
Yes.
So,
That,
Richard,
that Brabraham Institute is in the UK.
in the UK.
Okay.
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Richard, for this. Thanks, everybody, for participating. And once again, we'll see you next week. All the best for now.
All right.
Thank you.
See you. Good
Yeah,
to see
thank
you,
you.
everybody. Thank you for joining, and we'll see you next week.